It's a great pleasure to be here because, as Jim said, both of us kind of came out of International House. I spent all my employed career, just about, was with International House. I did start out at the Cantons School of English at Oxford Circus. That was before I realized that you could get any training in this at all. A friend of mine, when I was earning 15 quid a week in London, was earning 25. And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Teaching English." "What's that?" "These guys all speak English, don't they?" And he told me. So I applied to all 3 schools in the Yellow Pages in London that taught English. And I went for interviews at 2 of them. And I got turned down in both cases because they asked me those tricky questions like, what's the difference between I'm going to go to the station and I will go, stuff. And I said, they're the same. And then eventually, one Sunday evening, I got a call from Mr. Cantons. And I remember him with great pleasure and humour. And he said, are you free tomorrow, Monday morning? "Yeah." "Could you start at my school?" "Yeah." My English teacher's just walked out, and I need someone in a hurry." "Okay. I haven't done a course, so I don't know how to do it." "I'll tell you in a minute." "By the way, I won't be in tomorrow either." And he then said, "Look, this is how you teach English." So I listened to him and asked the right questions, and then I went in the next morning. It was just wonderful. It was wonderful. I didn't know how to teach English, but it was just fabulous. And then we had a student who was at a very, very low level, and I felt very sorry for her. And I said, "What on earth can we do? Are there any schools that teach beginners?" And I heard someone talking about International House. "Try there, Shaftesbury Avenue." So I took her down. We trotted down together on the pavement at Shaftesbury Avenue, she not speaking any English. I said, "Sure, we teach beginners." I was so pleased, and I saw on the stairs, amidst all the chaos of Shaftesbury Avenue, I could just discern a sign that said teacher training, and I picked up a leaflet. And the rest is history. I didn't know you could do training in that, in that stuff. So then I started working for IH in London for a bit, and then we started International House Hastings. I was one of the founder members in 1973, can you believe? July 73 we opened. And I was there right until 99 when it closed and was sold, as one can sell these kinds of schools, to someone else, and that was the end of it. That's where I met Jim and many, many, many other people, including lots of other people in IH, because I was the director of studies, and I was also one of the directors of the school and of the Teacher Training Institute there. But also, I started to do what they then called inspections, and they then changed it to visits, and I don't know what it's called now. But I used to do those. Inspections. Okay, so when I come back in 10 years, it'd probably be called visits. That's great. So anyway, I did some of these inspections to various schools where I got to know many other directors, and then I started going to the Directors' Conference also each year up until about 1999, and that was a lot of fun. I met a lot of people. Probably Directors of Studies change more quickly, I suppose, than the directors and principals and owners do. Anyway, it's nice to be here and nice to meet some of you I know and some of you I don't. So this is the stuff that Jim has covered. There, I guess, is the basic question that we're starting from. And the idea of doable demand, something which is more demand but is doable. And that's what makes it different rather than more. This notion of a meme, just a little something, a little thought, a wave, a Mexican thought. The Mexican thought. So I'm going to do 1 or 2 practical activities now, and they will, many of them appear as if they are nothing new, and that's fine. They're not necessarily intended to be. Some may be new. What I'm interested in is asking you to track the learning moves that you make to do them, rather than the technique itself. By all means, watch the technique. That might be interesting. But more interesting is, what are the moves that you are making to do that? And it just occurred to me, and I haven't really tested this out, but it occurs to me to say something like this. Jim talked about skill set and higher skill set. And I've just been thinking, maybe skill set, the teacher's asking, what do you do? What does the student do? What do I need to do to get the student to do what they need to do? And the higher skill set is asking, what do you do to do that? What goes on when you do that? So, because that's what we're interested in, rather than the doing that, we're interested in getting behind the doing that. What do you do to do that? Because that's where I want to intervene. And in a sense, that's the higher skill set. I'm just making this up, so we might drop it at the end. Now, I'm not sure if there's another slide there. No, I don't think there is. So this is an inquiry, and the activities that we're going to do are going to be with you, which means with fluent speakers, native or non-native, but fluent. And obviously, most of these would be done with non-fluent speakers. However, it seems to me the difference between a game and an exercise is this. An exercise sort of applies to a certain level. A game applies to one's humanness, and therefore can be played by anyone. Take soccer. It can be played at all levels. Not only at all levels, but for a few moments, a professional soccer player could engage with a 4-year-old. And they could find a game between two humans that they would make between them that would actually be fun for both of them. And a game can do that. And an exercise doesn't aim to do that. An exercise does do that if it becomes a game. So I'm interested also then in game and in playfulness and the extraordinary engageability of playfulness. And I'm looking for that. I don't want to reduce it to playfulness, but I think playfulness is very, very important in this. Right, I'm going to leave that. This is not a PowerPoint-based thing, so we're going to be doing stuff, and if it interests you, write it down, or don't. Just about 6 or 7 activities as I've got them written down, but by the time we get inside and crawl around and unpack them, it may turn out a bit more than that. Here's the first. This is about the way that a teacher gives a model. It's not a teacher training course. I'm not going to show you other ways of giving models. I'm interested in what do you do to do that. So I'm going to keep reminding you of that. Okay, if I give you the standard approach to giving a model, it's something like this. And maybe I'm exaggerating or ridiculing just to make my point. It's wintertime in Greenwich. It's wintertime in Greenwich. It's wintertime in Greenwich. Repeat. It's wintertime in Greenwich. And again. It's wintertime. And again. It's wintertime in Greenwich. And so on, okay? So I'm ridiculing, but I'm just to make a point. There's a way, a kind of standard way from which we depart a bit for a drilling. Here's something else. I'm going to say this only once. And when I've said it, I'd like you just to continue hearing it in your mind's ear. Because I'm only going to say it once. But I want you to continue hearing it, and in my voice too. We are 300 yards west of the meridian. Can you hear it? Can you still hear it? In my voice? Let it change into your voice, but don't speak aloud. Maybe you notice a difference, maybe you don't. And now say it most beautifully aloud to your neighbor. What did you do to do the second one? What happened? I said it, and then? What happened? Tell me, for you.
When I was imagining it with your voice.
You're imagining it. Tell me more about imagining it.
I was kind of thinking how you said it.
You were thinking how I said it, okay. More? You're hearing it? So it was replaying. Is it, can I say you were hearing it in your mind's ear?
Yes.
Okay. So something holds it. We have a phonological loop that can hang on to stuff. It's very simple. You experience it all the time. You look at a phone number, you go to the phone, and How come it's still there? Because you're saying it. You're not saying it with your lips, you're saying it in a phonological loop, which incidentally has a pronunciation and has a voice. And if you listen to it, it might be some ethereal voice, but it might well be yours. So I said that, and then you heard it in a voice in your mind's ear. What happened next? You start to think about it as well, that's true. What else happened? Okay, so later you put it in your own voice. But what happened before that? You're replaying it. Do you notice that you could replay it several times? Did you notice that you had an impression that while you may have been a little uncertain of it, it was there, and for a while it was my voice, with my voice tone? Did it have my intonation? Yes. Did. And my stress and my whole pattern, and all my connected upness. And it was there. And you could listen to it almost at leisure. Even you could think, now, what am I doing? Ah, yes, I'm doing, let me listen again. And you could replay it. Now, perhaps it's gone now, but it lasted for 5 seconds, enough to do quite a bit. How many times did you listen to it?
Three.
Sometimes, okay, a few times. And you can replay it. And one of the interesting things about the inner ear is that it maintains, for a while, an extraordinary kind of accuracy. And if you listen to something in a foreign language, you can hear it, and you can take that impression. As soon as you start to get your muscles around it, you start to damage it, because your muscles don't agree to do that yet. But if you just leave it before muscles, free, you can actually hear it much more accurately. And that's very interesting, because it means each student has the potential for two. That is, the original and the effort. So, in other words, you hear it, and then when you make it, you hear the difference. You can be shocked, you can be jarred by the difference. Do you get what I'm saying? So, and this can work with any language, and no doubt you've experienced it. And the inner ear is often more accurate. So, for example, what I call the cake shop experience. You're standing outside a cake shop in a country where you don't speak the language very well, but you understand cakes. And there is a cake which needs eating, and so you stand there before going in, and you rehearse the sentence that you need. And it sounds pretty good, because it's in the inner ear, and it's quite fluent. And you open the door, and you open your mouth, and what comes out? It's not quite the same. And of course, that's because it's after muscles. And muscles are, at the moment, differently wired up. But there, you see, and what the important thing is that you are jarred by it. You heard that, and then you heard that. Now, we could get our students to be doing that. If our students had two, so they hear and work on and then bring out and are jarred, instead of which, since we don't use this inner listening, we just have blurt, and then teacher comes around with a dustpan and brush. And it is the number two. No, you can't do that. So I'm making a lot out of a very little. But there is a different way of giving a model. And if we ask, what does the student have to do that? First, they have to hear it. And perhaps realize, gosh, I can hear it. Gosh, I can still hear it. Or maybe, I can hear it, but I can't hear that little bit, which in the foreign language is what happens. And then in the foreign language, you notice which bit it is that you can't quite hear. And then, of course, the teacher says, would you like to hear it again? Yes, please. Now, the teacher says it again. What's going to be different? Assuming the teacher says it the same. But what will be different for the student? They know what to listen for. And you can't do that in the first method of drilling. It doesn't work because it's not wired up like that at all. It's not wired up to make that possible. In fact, so you hear it, you record it, you replay it, you listen to it, and then you notice how, as it transitions to after muscles, something else begins to happen to it. A distortion begins to occur. So there's two ways of giving a model. Here's a third way. So speak each sound aloud, please. First word? Next? Okay, say this one. Quite small. And say this one. A bit longer. And join them together. Join them. How many syllables? And the first one or second one stressed? Okay, make it stressed. Here, how many syllables? First or second stressed? All right, so do those two connected. And the whole thing? But now do it as a kind of single gesture. Okay. So there's a third way of modeling something. In other words, in this case, the teacher doesn't say it at all. Now, okay, you know the sounds and you're fluent, but it's not so different, and you know that with most students we can do that. I would expect my students from day 2 of course to be able to do something like you just did. In other words, I would teach the chart right at the beginning because everything else comes from that. So there's 3 ways of giving a model. The second way is my favored way because they do here a kind of end model, a user model, and they also work on it. They really work on it to make it theirs. And that's a beginning for all sorts of ways of doing things. And we're going to return to that in a moment. So my question is, what do students have to do that when we unpack that? And in that kind of model, you are each working at your own level. You're each working at your own level. Let's move on. Now, I'm going to work with a bit of course book. So I've just taken a bit of material, which I've got up here, and that stands for any material in any course book. There's the text. Have a read of it, because there are going to be some questions in a moment. This is from Robert O'Neill. Date? Before most of you were born, 1970. English and Sits. All right, there's the situation. Here are the questions. All right. I'd like you, please, to formulate an answer to question 1. And I'd like you, please, to listen to you saying that internally on your mind's ear. Listen to your answer. Notice the words. Notice how you join the words together. Notice where the stresses are. And notice the kind of intonation or feeling that you'd like to give that little sentence that you're making. And when you've got it, when you've massaged it, could you say that with pleasure and delight to your neighbour? So, now then, I'd like you please to take that answer and insert a mistake into it. And the mistake could be another word that's not needed, a word that's missing, a wrong order. It could just be badly said, or some other mistake that you fancy, all right? So could you just rehearse a little mistake? Right, I want to have a look at ways that I might meet that mistake. And I'm going to use an old friend of ours, finger correction. Okay, who's got a sentence with a mistake? Anyone? Can I have yours?
Okay.
Said.
That a certain notorious criminal was in a hotel room with a woman.
Okay, could you say that again, nice and clear, and you guys listen carefully.
That a certain notorious criminal was in a hotel room with a woman.
Is there a mistake there?
I thought there was.
Is there a mistake? I can't hear it.
No? I thought my notorious wasn't very well pronounced.
Well.
Yeah.
Okay, so first word? No, this is what I'm going to do. Could you say the first bit again? And it's hard to stick to the mistake.
It is, yeah. Okay, that a certain notorious.
I'm just imagining. As a certain notorious criminal.
Okay, thank you.
But
Go on.
what was the end of the sentence? Was in a hotel room. Was in a hotel. So
All right, now, do it with the mistake in your way.
there was a certain notorious notorious criminal in the hotel room with a woman.
Okay, so we've got this constructed mistake. So, 5 steps to finger correction. And the fingers aren't what's important. What's important is what it makes the student do. Okay, so let's come around. I want to keep that. Can I have another mistake? Who has? What have you got? Got a mistake?
There were one man in the hotel room.
Okay, could you just stand up and say this most beautiful and delicious mistake? Say that too.
There were one man in the hotel room.
Okay. So now, I'm going to stand here, and the first step, as you know, is just to look a little bit at the teacher, just at the student, and just pause so that she can think about it. And she knows that pause means reconsider. Okay? Now, she maybe corrects it, but she maybe doesn't. Okay, so what's step 2? Step 2 is to say, okay, could you say it again? And I want you to make the same mistake.
There were one man in the hotel room.
Okay, so what we know now is that she hasn't ironed it out. Doesn't mean she doesn't know it and can't do it, but at the moment she hasn't spotted it. It's not kind of near the top of her pile. So what's the next thing to do? I'm going to load it onto my fingers. So could you give me that sentence again?
There were
One word.
There were one man in the hotel room.
So what I've done is to make it, so to speak, not English by just breaking it up into words. And this is the 3rd step, and it may be that as she does that, she jars herself and she says, okay, no, wait a minute, let me change that. Okay, and then we're finished. But if she doesn't, so what's the next step? Well, now it looks like she needs a bit more help, so I'm going to do this. Could you make the same mistake?
There were one.
So now we just stay here and see if it burns. Does it hurt? That's what I want to know. Okay, so now this is stage 4.
There were one.
Okay, so what I've done now is again, I want to give the least that is enough. I gave less before and it wasn't enough. So now we're homing in on it, and now the finger stays there. She can't move on, and does it hurt or doesn't it? All right, if she looks at me and nothing moves, then I know that it doesn't hurt. So I know then that we have to go on to something else. So what's the next step going to be? Okay, so now what am I going to do? Well, actually, I've got a nice inconsistency here, so I can actually point to the 2 of them and just see if she can do something with that. And if she can't, maybe I'll take that out. Change that.
There was one man in the hotel room.
Okay, say it quickly and loud.
There was one man in the hotel room.
Okay, now I still have a question about it, don't I? So what I'm going to do here. Okay.
There was a man in the hotel room.
Okay, and now quickly in English.
There was a man in the hotel room.
Yeah, lovely. Okay, so thank you very much. 5 steps, and each of those is just an illustration of keeping up the demand at the level at which maybe you are. The first one is wide open, gradually focusing in, focusing in, focus in, focus in, focus in, focus in. 5 stages before we actually point it out or change it. Now, supposing she doesn't know the answer, what am I going to do then? Well, I could go to other students, that's fine, or I could go to the chart and start to offer another word here, or according to what it is that's needed. Now, even that is a slightly different intervention from someone telling her it. What's different about that intervention over me saying, or over him saying, How is it different to you? What does it do? Well, first of all, you've got to get it, because you've got to actually go through a process. You're not just getting a free You've actually got to pay for it a bit. Secondly, instead of just getting the answer, you're having to work at the answer, listen to it on your phonological loop. What's that? Yeah, it's I get it, yeah. So it's already got tentacles, it's already got connections all around it. It's not just a free, gratis correction that came from me or from another student. Now, what was the first step? Student makes a mistake. Then? First step? Pause. See what she does, see if it hurts. Second step, it doesn't hurt. So, second step?
Could you repeat that again?
Repeat. Say it again. And now she's going to do it slightly differently, and maybe as she says it, it will hurt. It doesn't. So, third step? Load it onto the fingers. Okay? She starts to say too much. I say, no, one word. Stop, one word. And then we get it on there. And that in itself maybe unhooks her. It doesn't. So, fourth step? Go to the place. And it may be something missing, in which case we've got to kind of hover. It may be something that's there that shouldn't be. And then we start to correct. As you know, you can do lots of things with things. You can take the end off, you can put another word in, you can join things together, all that stuff. But that's by the way. These are the basic 5 steps. Now, you've got an answer to the first question which has a mistake in it. Could you just, I'd like you please, and I give you 30 seconds for this, turn to your partner, one of you make the mistake, and the other go through those 5 steps. Just do it. So, again, the point is not the technique. I'm not showing you a new technique, or I might be, but that's not the point. The point is, what does a student have to do this? The point is to ride the mental and learning processes that the student is going through and to try to get as close to them as possible, to actually intervene at that higher level of intervention, and to become used to kind of making learning moves visible. Now, could you have a look at question 2, please? And could we have 1 or 2 answers to question 2? Tim, could you give us an answer?
They went to the hotel room.
Okay. Now, did you hear that?
Yes.
Okay. Say it with great interest, as if it's something we would never have thought of.
They went to the hotel room.
Now, can anyone give us another way of saying that? Say it. Another. Come on, alternatives. Same meaning, different words. Sorry? You have to speak loud, I can't hear.
They checked it out.
Okay, you got that one? Another?
They rushed to the hotel room.
Okay, and another.
They found themselves in the hotel room.
Okay, yeah. Yeah? That's getting interesting. And another one?
They
They
ran.
decided to go.
Sorry, please, yours?
They ran to the hotel.
Yeah, you'll have to say it that way.
They ran to the hotel.
Okay, and another?
They decided to go to the hotel.
Okay. Now, if I'm doing this with an intermediate or elementary class, how is it the same and how is it different? Will they be able to do something with this at elementary, intermediate level?
Was simple.
Huh?
Was simple.
They will come up with some alternatives. And they may contain mistakes, and that's fine because we'll work with them. And what I'm trying to do here, and at any point in any lesson, is to take the thing that's being said and then simply say, another, 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 another. And what's that doing? What does the student do to do that? In fact, what did you do to do that? Well, perhaps it goes in there and perhaps you're listening to it. But what you're doing is you are running through grammar as you have it. And in the case of native and fluent speakers, that's, it's like a split second and you can, like a Google search, and you've already got loads of answers immediately. But what about the students? Well, what they're doing is testing out the grammar that they know, that they half know, that they think they know, and the grammar that they hunch and intuit, and the grammar that's flowing over from mother tongue. And it's a kind of swirl. But what I call this fat grammar. This is working with, this is fattening their grammar. What we're saying to them is, of all the words you know, let any meet any and see if one of them will do here. In other words, press return and let them all jigger around for a second or two. Now what can you, how else can you say this? And of course, what they'll do is come up with some straight correct answers, which they download from their certain knowledge, and they'll come up with speculative ones, which start to play around with intuition and hunch and interference from mother tongue and so on. That's fat grammar. In other words, how many different ways can you say this? I'm not saying, what's the grammar you're being taught right now? Of all that you know, including what you don't know, how else could you say this? How else might you say it? And some of your hunches will be really interesting, and some will be things that you heard someone else say. This contrasts with spindly grammar. Fat grammar and spindly grammar. Spindly grammar is where we work on a certain word sequence, and we don't really depart from that. We might add to it, or we might, into that framework, take that word out and put another one in and change the verbs, or change the adjectives, change the person, link the two sentences together. And that's all manipulation of what I would call spindly grammar. In other words, we're not making everything that we can from what we have. We're making a certain thing that we can from what we have because we've got a certain thing in mind. And I'm not really educating your hunch. I'm not really inviting your intuition and your smart guesswork. I'm inviting your certainty. Different thing. It's okay, but there's much, much more to learning than that. So, let's just take the next question, why? Could someone answer why? Just doesn't matter what your why answer is, but just answer it in a bold way that we can all hear. Anyone? You don't even need to make a mistake. Have you forgotten the original text?
No. I have an answer.
You're getting some notoriety here, aren't you? All right, answer to the question of why. Yeah, please.
They've been looking for him for a long time.
Okay. Do you hear that? Now, one thing I can do is say that another way, could you?
They've been searching for him for a very long time.
Okay. Another?
They've been on the search for a long time.
Okay. And now could someone, what was the first word? Okay, make a sentence that answers it but doesn't begin with that word.
He was on their police have been searching.
Sorry?
The police have been searching.
Okay. And another one that doesn't begin with police?
Because
Okay, yours?
he'd been on the run for a while.
Okay.
Because they were looking for him.
Okay, so now all of these at a slightly lower level are possibles which your students will want to come up with. They do it with their mother tongue and they'll be trying to see how they... So that's fat grammar. Now, here's another thing we can do. What was your original one? Can you remember it?
Hopefully. They've been looking for him for a very long time.
Okay, could you come here, please, and just write it here? And what I'd like you to do...
Without the very.
Okay, now, just say it again.
They've been looking for him for a long time.
Okay, now, could you write the words here, higgledy-piggledy, not in a sentence, but just one there, one there, one there, one there, or fill the chart. Okay, so what he's making is what I would call a word pool. He's taking what we've done with a certain degree of certainty, and now we're making it available for something quite different. And here's the question. All right. Now, could you make any other sentence out of that? And when you've made the sentence, this is the discipline of this. When you've made the sentence, I want you please to come here and point it out.
Do you have to use all the words?
No, you don't. No, you don't. And just to begin with, just to get the ball rolling, could you come here and point out the original sentence? And there's one other thing. Whenever someone points, the pointing person is silent because they're doing something else. Everyone else says whatever is pointed at, regardless of right or wrong. So. Okay, in English? Okay, so now, who has another sentence made of a selection of those words but no others? As soon as you're ready, please come, and don't wait. We need people. Okay, you speak, you point. Okay, in English? Another? You don't have to use all the words. Now, here's the thing. Notice what you're doing. The technique is one thing, but what are you doing to do it? That's the key question. Okay, off you go. Yep. So you have to stand back a bit. Okay. Okay. In English? Thank you. Another? Did you have one? Get ready with your next one so we can keep this moving quite quickly. Thank you. And this is what happens. Suddenly it gets kicked out of the space we'd been playing in. And suddenly we find we're in another dimension. And this is what you do with language. All language, but perhaps especially English, since any word can mean anything anywhere. And suddenly we're in a new zone. And maybe some people want to know, what does that mean? Okay, find another word for it. You know. Okay, back to this exercise, please. All right. So we're into sci-fi here, aren't we? Yeah. So this is a guy taken over by aliens, all right? And we need the language for that because it happens all the time. Who else has another? Okay, so there's the point. Now, that sentence is... don't forget, I would probably do this, which I forgot. I would do that, and that, and that. And I just provide those so that we can have... Say it. You see, and suddenly you start to get off on it. Now, what are you doing? That's the point. What are you doing? What are you doing to do this?
Thinking of all the possibilities.
You may be doing a number of things. One is you're choosing a word and putting some others around it to see what? To see if it's okay. What does okay mean? Well, it means partly that the ring of the sound in your mind's ear is okay, and partly there's another scrutiny that's taking place. And as you do it, you're watching others, and then maybe you try a different strategy. Let me just try with one word. Let me try with two. Let me put it there. Let me put it there. You may actually not just be thinking about it, but actually experimenting and not knowing if it's possible until you've heard it said. And once you've heard it said, you can then say, oh, well, actually, if I put a question mark at the end, it'll work. Or actually, if I put very in, that would work then. Or I want a word that isn't there, so I'll have to abandon it. Now, this is what's going on inside. This is, again, an aspect of fat grammar. Here's some words. What else can you do with it? And this is like saying much language, few words. Much language, few words. This is hard to do through pre-written materials. This is a spontaneous improvisation. Much words, little language you can do with prepared materials. It's fixed. You can do that. You can predict it. But what you can't do is fat grammar. What you can't do is multiple ways of saying something. What you can't do is much language with very few words. But that is, in a sense, that's the spirit of the language, to be able to make lots out of little. English is particularly good at that, but every language you do that. And in fact, if you learn to make everything possible out of the 100 most frequent words in a language, you pretty much have the language. You'd need, obviously, nouns, verbs, and adjectives, but the cipher, you'd pretty much have got the cipher. Just provide some vocabulary, please. What is it? Okay. Or? Don't be so literal. Huh? Thing? Yeah, thing. Radar screen. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Make a sentence. Yeah. Yeah, thing is the right word. Go on, make your sentence.
The markers are on the clip thing.
See, this is it. This is it. And if you heard your Spanish or Arabic student saying that, he'd say, yeah, that is fantastic. You know, the markers are on the clip thing. You've got it. I want you to continue now and include that in this.
The markers are on the clip thing that's on the board.
Include this also.
The markers are on the clip thing that's on the board under the clip thingy. The flip chart is, or the chart is stuck to the board with the markers on the clip thing.
Okay. So there's one assembly. Who can do a different assemblage of that stuff? Just try. There's no right answers here.
The markers are on the thing above the chart on the board.
Okay. In English. Rapidly.
The markers are on the clip thing above the chart on the board.
Okay. A different way?
The markers are on the clip thing on the board with the chart on it.
So, the exercise is not important. What are you doing to do this? What's going on? What do you have to do this?
You make a lot of adjustments in your prepositions and your words.
Okay. So we start out with something very quick and doable and rather basic. Some items of vocabulary. In fact, only 4 or 5 items of vocabulary. We then, without any instruction from the teacher, just put them together and say, make a sentence. And already, suddenly, we're into intermediate level. And then we add one more thing, and suddenly we're at quite an advanced level, making quite sophisticated, but everyone's doing it at their own level. Everyone is at the edge, like Jim's son, Orlando. Everyone's at the edge of what they can do and trying to push it. No one's just sort of working in the middle of what they can do. Everyone's at the edge of their capacity. So, again, this is game-like. I propose this is game-like, but it also involves students in pushing themselves to the edge and very quickly. Now, we could easily do that here. I could say, could you make a sentence, any sentence you like, but it must contain this. Okay, say it. Any sentence you like which contains that. And be brief, so we haven't got time.
I'd like to go to lunch now.
Okay, all right. Now, could you add in, please, that and that? I want a sentence, a short sentence with those two in it.
I'll do it for you.
And could you make a short sentence with that and that?
I'd do it for you for $1.
And now add this.
I'd do it for you a long time for $10.
And as soon as we enter the zone of creativity, other stuff starts to happen, you know. Okay, so all I'm doing there is a very, very simple exercise. I mean, the technique is negligible, but what's important is what's going on behind. That's what I'm trying to cook. That's what I'm trying to play with. You've got the flour, you've got the water, but where's the yeast that actually makes all that stuff we've got in the lesson into something? Where's the fire that heats the mixture, that makes it into bread? Okay, could you have a look at the third one, the fourth one? What did they find? Now, could you get the answer ready? Listen to yourself, massage the answer, make a beautiful answer. Okay, could we have your answer, please?
They only found the woman.
Okay, do you hear that? Do you want it again?
They only found the woman.
So there it is. Okay. Now, how many words? All right. Are there any of 2 syllables? Okay. Could you listen to the last word in your mind's ear? Don't say it, listen to it. How many sounds in it? Okay, how many syllables?
2.
How many sounds?
5.
All right. Let's put... Could you say those sounds, please? What's the first sound? Next? 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 Can you make any other words out of that? Okay.
Not using all of them.
You know, just any, can you use any of those sounds to make a word? That's a possible one, isn't it? We're slightly questioning of this. Okay, what about this? Is that possible? It is in some actions, that's possible, yeah. Okay, let's put in one more sound. Anything you can make now? All right, so what about this? Sort of. Okay, so what do you do to do that? How were you making new words out of individual sounds? See, that's a completely different thing. What you're doing there is putting sounds together and seeing if it's a word. There's no way of predicting. It's not even in spelling. So what's happening there is that you're activating your inner ear, listening to it, and then saying, yeah, that's a word, or that isn't a word, and I recognize it. There's at least 3 processes going on in there, and each of you doing it, of course, at your own level. So once we have got this kind of inner workbench where students are listening to the words, I can say, listen to that word. How many words are it? It's a very powerful... What do you do when I say how many words? You count them. How do you count them?
In your head.
You're listening to them. Okay, so here they are. You're listening to them. Supposing, let me just give you a sentence. Don't say it, but listen to it. You are old, Father William, the young man said. Can you hear it? How many words?
9.
Okay. Which one has the highest kind of pitch level? And the lowest? So you're running through it, you can hear it, you can actually pick up on that stuff. It is there. And then I can say, what's the second word? And how did I say it? So you're running it again and you can hear that. So that's the question, how many words? What do? You actually slow it down and you count the words and you can hear them. And then you put it together, and you can take them apart again. And I say the last word, in this case here, woman, How many sounds? And again, you take it apart and you can hear it. Let's go back. Could you see how many times is the letter R there? Quick as you can. 6, 9, any advance? Okay, all right. Here's another one. Could you look quickly through just the first sentence down to woman? How many times can you find any of these letters, S, Q, and J? One, two. Okay, so that was a fairly straightforward exercise. How did you do that? Well, we'll come to that in a moment. Here's a different one. Could you look through that passage and find out how many times the sound E? Three? 3, 4, 2. Okay, now, once again, the exact answer is not actually the purpose of this. That's not this kind of what these tasks. What's important is what did it make you do? So that's the question. What did you do to do that? Can you separate out the separate steps that you had to do what I asked you to do? I said, how many times the sound E? So what did you do? I mean, you can say, I counted, but that's not the whole story. I counted a number of times E. What did you do to count them? Okay, so first, you've got to have as a marker the sound E. And that's standing at the side. You can refer back to it. Okay, that's there. It's ready to resonate. What are you then doing? Reading and looking for one that presses the button and the light goes on. And you're carrying on through. So you're holding on to a sound and you're sounding all the others. You're working at all those words. And not only are you doing that, but you're actually discerning that sound from all of the other sounds. Very powerful exercise, and doing it quite rapidly. And how would our students do it? Of course, they'd be more challenged than you just were, but they'd do it. And whatever the result was would tell us something about what we need to do now to help them precisely. Because they might not be able to do it at all. They may simply not have a resonance for E. Or the resonance for E might disappear as soon as they start doing that. And that already tells us something to work with. I'd like to round off now. And the question is this. Those are just a few little pointers, perhaps. As Jim said, we are not doing this with certainty. We're trying to do this with inquiry. There isn't a right answer to all this, but there's a gut feeling that something is missing or something could be different, and we've labeled it at the moment demand high. And in this little bit of inquiry that we just did now, I suppose the question was, what's going on in the student when they're doing this? Not what have they got to do, but what do they need to do it? And if we just get behind, and I'm kind of proposing that's the beginning of this higher skill set, to be able to touch that, to get closer up to the learning moves that are taking place. Now, where are you now with this notion of demand high? And I'm not saying, what do you think we're saying? You can say that if you like, but where are you? What do you want to say about it? What button does, if any button at all, what does it press for you? What's your way of saying? What do you want to say about this? If you were to summarize it, what is it that you'd summarize? If it's a question for you, what is the question? If it presses an unspoken something, what is that unspoken something? How would you speak it? Thank you.